It's going to be as short as a Baptist preacher can be. Jeremiah chapter 50, beginning at verse 4, we find these words recorded. In those days and at that time, declares the Lord, the people of Israel and the people of Judah shall come together, weeping as they come, and they shall seek the Lord their God. And they shall ask the way to Zion with their faces turned toward it, saying, Come, let us join ourselves together to the Lord in an everlasting covenant that will never be forgotten. It was the English poet Robert Browning, reflecting on the incongruities of life, who wrote, I walked a mile with pleasure. She chatted all the way, but left me none the wiser for all she had to say. But then I walked a mile with sorrow. Never a word said she, but oh, the things I learned when sorrow walked with me. To survey the book of Jeremiah is to, in a sense, sift through the ruins that are left because God's people have failed to be faithful to their God. It is, in a sense, to survey the rubble left behind when God levies righteous judgment on a wayward people. But in the midst of sifting through this ruin and this rubble, we find a redemptive word. That the pain that God's people have been made to endure ultimately serves the purpose of bringing them back to Him, back to faithfulness, and back together again. The text before us, the Lord's people are leaving the experience of exile, and it informs us that their faces are set toward Zion. Not only a physical return to a physical space, but a spiritual return to God again. It informs us that these two nations who previously considered themselves to be enemies are coming together for the purpose of coming back to God. And they are coming back to God because God has placed something in us, as Augustine said, that only He can fill. Yet there is a strange historiographic detail in this text that calls out for our attention. There are those who are returning to Zion, returning to God, who are returning home. They're returning to a place that is familiar to them, a place that they remember, a place that they've been to before. And there are others who are returning home for the first time. Theologically, you see, our salvation by grace through faith means our coming home, our coming back to God. But in a more historical sense, we are not here today to come together again. We are here today to come together. Because our community still is characterized by division and chasm. And we have grown too comfortable living on either side of this chasm. The sacred work we must do here today is not coming together again, but coming together for the first time. Acknowledging the ways in which we've been divided, and even now our city is divided. As there are some in our city who are made to feel unsafe by the protest of people who have always felt unsafe. Our sacred charge is to come together for the first time. The passage before us encourages us because it says to us that in spite of our brokenness, God calls us back to Him. He calls us back to Him in individual relationship. He calls us back to Him and a recommitment to biblical and theological faithfulness. He calls us not only back to him, but he calls us to live together, to lay aside that which divides us, to lay aside that which causes these chasms and these injustices among us, to lay it aside, to come back to him, and to come back together. The text says that those who are making their way from Babylon back home again are asking, which way is Zion? Which way and how do we go back to God again? Wouldn't it be good if we had a path? Wouldn't it be good if we had a way? We do. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And if we are going to go back to God, if we are going to go back to faithfulness, and if we are going to come together, not performatively, but sincerely, we must go through Jesus Christ. There are those in this text who are going home for the first time. There are those in this text who are going home again, but all of them need to be shown the way. It is our sacred work, in closing, to show our community the way. It is our sacred work, in closing, to understand what it really costs and what it really means to come together for the first time and answer the call of this text, to come back to God, to come back to faithfulness, and finally come together. God bless you.